Hello, I'm Zaccura and welcome back to my channel, and today's video is going to be a bit of a topic discussion, art and chat situation. And this video is a bit of a continuation of my previous video where I showed the results of my Himi Jelly Gouache Lightfastness test. Today I'll be talking about some ways you can do professional work with these jelly gouaches and really most any materials that you like. I think it's a really good topic for traditional artists in particular who want to do professional work but aren't sure if their supplies are good enough, or maybe are in a situation where it's not very practical to invest in very expensive professional grade supplies, or are kind of like me and have a bunch of student grade materials that you just really enjoy using but are kind of on the fence of whether it's appropriate to use them in a professional way. And in the meantime, in the background of this video, I'm going to be painting something very special with these Himi jelly gouaches. So it's kind of a packed video, gonna be one of those like over 20-minute Zaccura rambling. So tuck yourselves in, my lovely Zaccura community. Grab some tea and let's get into it. The painting you're seeing me paint was a commission I finished back in November, and I felt it would be the perfect subject matter for the background of this video because it's a great example of how you can use these jelly gouaches, or really any paints, in a professional manner. Because this was a traditional painting, but it was delivered to my client digitally, meaning I didn't actually have to worry at all about the paints themselves because all that mattered was the finished image. I actually did end up avoiding the non-Lightfast colors in this painting, so I would actually feel comfortable if my client had received the original, but that is beside the point at this moment. And I'll chat more about the actual painting a little bit later in this video. For now, the point is that I painted a commission traditionally and then delivered it digitally. And I think that one really great way to use any paints or tools that you enjoy using but are unsure whether it would be appropriate to give the original to a client is simply to offer digitally delivered commissions. This is the most common method of delivery for digital art, obviously, and a lot of newer artists who are just starting in the world of professional work start with offering simple digital artwork commissions, which are drawn on the computer and then usually emailed to the client. But let's face it, not everybody is a digital artist, or maybe you're like me and you enjoy both digital and traditional art and you don't want to be limited in what you can do professionally. But being able to digitally deliver artwork, regardless of how it was originally made, is a fantastic way to do professional work. You don't have to worry about shipping or your artwork getting damaged in transit, and you get to use the tools that you prefer, which for a lot of people are traditional paints and pencils and markers, etc, etc. All you really need is a decent scanner, which most at-home printers will have, but if you don't have one, you can always either invest in a tabletop scanner, or if you don't do this kind of work very often, then you can just head over to your local print shop or office supply shop, and they will usually have scanners that you can use for a really small fee. And it does also help if you do have some rudimentary editing software, so you can adjust your colors and remove unwanted dust that may have gotten scanned in, but that is pretty much it. Then you would just email it to your client like you would a digital commission. Also, just in general, I highly recommend scanning and storing your work digitally as a really great way to preserve your artwork, especially pieces that you're not completely sure of its longevity. This way you can always have a version that looks as beautiful as the day you painted it. And digital preservation also opens up a whole new world of ways to sell your work, not just commissions. You can open your own shop and start selling art prints and stickers and stationery like I do. You can also try going the image licensing route, which is something that is not discussed much within the artist community, but it is a very realistic and viable way to be a professional artist. And I'm not a total expert on it, but if you guys would like me to make like a video discussing it at least, you know, I could, just let me know. But long story short, digital is a really great way to go, regardless if you are a digital or a traditional artist, because with all of these professional means that I just mentioned, it completely does not matter what paints or materials you use to make the artwork, so long as the image looks good. You can use whatever you want. Student grade, professional grade, doesn't matter. So utilize that technology. But if you do want to offer physical commissions or just sell original paintings, you know, old school style, both of which I've personally only begun doing very recently, there is still a lot you can do with whatever tools you already have or enjoy using. But the first and most important step to such professionalism is to learn about your tools. Most art supplies that label themselves as student grade offer very limited information on the kinds of pigments they use, its lightfastness grade, and so on. However, just because the information is not offered, one should not automatically assume the worst. Inversely, just because a paint set is labeled as professional grade, you shouldn't automatically assume that it will do everything that you want or need it to do personally, because every artist works differently and every artist has different needs and preferences. The only way to really know whether a tool or material will work for you personally is to do your own research, both online and through your own experiments. A very simple one is a lightfastness test, like I did in my last video. This is a test that anyone with a window can do, and it's really easy and it's really insightful. And often the results will surprise you. In the example of this Himimiya gouache set, it was a pleasant surprise to see how well the majority of the colors held up. And obviously it is easier to just stick with paint brands that disclose their pigments and lightfastness rating, because of course doing your own DIY at-home tests do take time, and for some people it's simply not worth it to try out a bunch of materials and spend a bunch of time doing tests, and would much rather just stick to supplies that have more information readily available. And if that's you, then like all the respect to you. But again, this video is, I guess, more intended for people who are just starting out in the professional art world and most likely up to this point have probably been using just whatever tools they can get their hands on. That was certainly who I was when I was just starting out, up to when I started doing professional work. And when you're at that point, maybe you don't really have the means, or it's just not practical to invest in an entirely new set of tools for professional work up front. Because as we all know, art supplies can get mucho expensive. So doing these tests and doing extensive research, watching videos, are ways to enlighten yourself more on the tools and supplies you already have, you already own, so you can see how best to utilize them. And if and when you do find gaps where your current tools just can't hold up to a certain task that you need to do, then you probably will need to invest in some new materials and new tools and new supplies. But when you do, you will know exactly what you're looking for in those supplies, because you will know which aspects are currently lacking in the supplies you own now. So you can just focus on filling in those gaps rather than investing in things you don't necessarily need. So again, learn your tools, because ultimately professionalism isn't a matter of using tools that are expensive or have a label on them that says it's professional. It's not about what tools you use, but rather how well you know your tools and how well you know your business, so that you can provide services or create products that work within your life means while also meeting and exceeding your clients' needs and expectations. And once you empower yourself with the knowledge about your tools and materials, you will be able to make decisions for each and every job. And you'll be better for it, your budget will be better for it, and your clients and customers and partners will be receiving better things from you for it. Alright, cool. Now let's talk about preservation. This is becoming a bit of a boot camp, isn't it? Anyway, this whole video started on the pretense of lightfastness, and lightfastness is one important aspect of long-term preservation of original traditional artwork. So if we're talking about selling original paintings or commissions, then yes, lightfastness does matter. But how much it matters depends greatly on the specific job and the specific medium. that you painted with. I mentioned near the end of my last video that I didn't care so much if these paints started to show more signs of fading when exposed to sunlight for a longer period of time. And the reason I say that is because it's gouache, and gouache paintings, like watercolor paintings, are not meant to be kept out in the open. More than likely, a watercolor or gouache painting, which is painted on paper, will have to be displayed in a frame behind glass or acrylic. This is simply due to the delicate nature of the paints. It is far more likely your painting will end up getting damaged by water or moisture or oil from someone's hands way before any UV damage starts to show, if you hang it out in the open. So it is going to be, or it really should be, displayed behind glass, and glass in itself provides a tremendous amount of UV protection. And nowadays, you can even get frames that are considered UV filtering, which I was surprised to find are not that expensive, and they claim to absorb something like 90 to 95% of UV rays. That, combined with general care practices like keeping your painting away from direct sunlight, something you should always be doing regardless of what paints you use, should preserve your painting a whole lot better than any UV resistance that the pigments possess themselves. Of course, the bestest, safest, longest lasting way to preserve your paints is probably to have both a Lightfast color palette plus a good frame and proper displaying practices. Also, there are waxes and sprays and lamination techniques for essentially varnishing watercolor and gouache paintings, but again, they all have their pros and cons, and frankly, this is where you really just have to use your own judgment based on the job at hand to decide what tools to use. I mentioned that I would feel comfortable doing some commission work using these jelly gouaches, even paintings where I would be giving the original away, so long as I avoided some of the colors. But I don't also want to recommend it to other people. I don't want to tell people that they should feel exactly the same way, because I also know that I will be using my own best judgment for each and every job, and sometimes maybe I won't feel like it's the appropriate material for whatever reason. I don't know, and it doesn't matter. All that matters is whether or not I am able to get the client something that they are looking for, something that they will love. And that is honestly the only thing you really need to focus on if you want to do professional work. So I guess this whole section of this video can probably be summed up into me basically saying, do your gosh darn research. Don't let the tools that you use stop you from doing good work. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Okay, but since we're like halfway through this video, I should probably give some actual practical knowledge and tips for painting preservation. So here is my short list. Number 1. Always use acid-free paper. At this point, there is like no reason not to use acid-free paper. I'm pretty sure it's like more difficult to find. But anyway, use acid-free paper, and also be sure that anything that is going to have long-term contact with your painting is also acid-free. So this includes things like plastic sheaths, picture frame mats if your painting is going to be displayed inside of a frame, and these precautions will ensure that your painting does not yellow over time. At the moment when I do ship original paintings, I like to include a mat for the client that I make myself out of spare watercolor paper, one that I know is acid-free. This way, if they want to frame it, it's already included and it fits the artwork exactly. Number 2, allow your paintings to breathe. This applies both for storage and for displaying. According to my research, frankly, I don't have a whole lot of practical first-hand experience with this, but all of my online research has told me that it's actually better to store original paintings without a plastic sheath, because the plastic can possibly trap in moisture, and that can possibly lead to things like mold. So it's better to just keep the paintings in your drawer separated with sheets of acid-free paper so that each painting is not touching each other, but they can also breathe. I only use the plastic sheath when I package it to ship out to a customer or a client so that the painting is protected from possible major water damage, like actual droplets or getting soaked or something like that during shipment. And it also makes it easier to touch and handle for the client until they need to frame it. And when the painting is framed, it's best to make sure it's framed with a mat so that the painting is not directly touching the glass of the frame. This again will allow the painting to breathe. And those two tips, combined with general care practices like keeping the painting away from direct sunlight and away from moisture or damp areas, really concludes my list pretty much. I am by no means an expert. I frankly have not been doing professional work for very, very long, and even less with selling original paintings. And there's still a lot of things I've yet to try and yet to learn, in particular varnishing. I have seen methods to essentially varnish watercolor paintings with waxes and spray fixatives. I haven't looked into ways to do it with gouache, but I'm kind of assuming it would be similar because the two mediums are pretty similar. But regardless, it does seem to be a bit tricky because watercolor is water-based and very delicate. I have heard that some of the sealants work fine on watercolor, but then it destroys the ink used for any line art that may be in the painting, or the sealant starts cracking because the paper bends and the sealant was not intended to be bent. You know, I just personally feel that a frame is still the best method of protection for a watercolor or gouache painting that is painted on paper. It's just going to give you the most protection for the least risk of damage that additional chemicals could potentially cause. At least that's just according to my limited knowledge right now. I'm fully aware that I may change my opinion on this, years from now. But there you go. Acid-free, good frame, allow your painting to breathe, keep it away from direct sunlight and away from damp areas. All those things, as I've found, will protect your painting for a good long while. And that kind of concludes the topic discussion part of this video. And I can't stress it enough, I am by no means an expert. I'm just someone who really loves art and takes it very seriously and has learned some things over the few years that I've been an illustrator. And I hope by sharing what I know through this channel, I can potentially help people. I mean, that has always been my goal from the beginning of this channel. But everything I say, and I mean, this goes for every video I make, I think should just be taken as what one person said, one person's experience and opinion to add to your research or knowledge bank. And I fully acknowledge that what may work for one person may not work for everybody. But I do hope some of the things that I discussed was insightful or helpful to you guys. And now I guess I'll talk a bit about this painting that you've been seeing me create throughout this video. The name of this painting is The Only One, which is the direct translation of the Chinese characters on the bottom right of the painting. And there's a really cute story about that. Essentially, my client commissioned me to design a card, like a thank you card or greeting card, depicting a white chrysanthemum flower surrounded with possibly some snow and winter themes and maybe some Chinese motifs, saying that his plan was to print the card out at home and write a poem inside to then give to his significant other. And it was definitely one of those lucky commissions where I immediately had a visual concept based on my client's idea that just popped into my head. And it was actually my proposal to do it as a traditional painting because the vibe I was getting was just something really textured and soft, and I also have been meaning to get some more practice with gouache, so it felt like it was the perfect combination. And with the concept that I had in my head, I knew it would be vertical, and obviously the flower stem would be pretty skinny. So to balance the composition and fill up the whole page, I figured I could possibly add some Chinese calligraphy because I don't know much about Chinese motifs, but I have seen Chinese calligraphy and it looks really cool. So I asked him if he had any significant or meaningful words that he could think of that I could then translate into Chinese calligraphy, and he responded with, and I quote, "The only one." Can we all take a second to cry over that one? I don't know if he's watching this, but if he is, I hope I'm not embarrassing him. But come on, it's so sweet. Now, I did offer to do that Chinese calligraphy ordeal, knowing full well that I do not speak nor write Chinese. Granted, I suppose I was kind of expecting something really simple, like a single word, but after he gave me the only one, I just had to make that happen. Come on, come on. So I did spend some time on Google and Pinterest. It was easy enough to translate the words into Chinese characters via Google Translate, but then the hunt was afoot with trying to find the same characters in various calligraphy styles, because when you translate it in Google Translate, it just comes out as like standardized text version, and I wanted something pretty, something very hand-drawn, hand-painted. Eventually, I discovered that Google apparently has this huge database of fonts. I think they're called like Google Fonts. And it contains practically every language, and you can literally go in, type your words, select a language, and even like country, region, dialect, and see those words in a plethora of different fonts for free. And you can even download them for free. So I was able to find a few really neat Chinese calligraphy fonts, and I picked the one I felt would match the painting vibe the most, and I essentially copied it as close as I could. And as a last check, I did verify the characters and font with someone I know who speaks and writes Chinese so that I could make sure I was saying the correct thing, because Google Translate is great, but sometimes it is the opposite of great. But this time it was correct. The grammar, the understanding, the meaning, everything, the font was good to go. So thank goodness. Now, as for the flower, it was a bit difficult to paint because, one, chrysanthemums have like a million petals. So I did spend some time with the sketch, just trying to sketch out all the petals while keeping the shape properly. And two, it was a white chrysanthemum, and painting white things always trips me up a bit because if you're not careful, it can start to look like gray instead of white, because when you add shading, you are adding color. And often the colors you use for shading are pretty muted, and as you try to add more dimension and more 3D qualities, you end up adding way too much color until it doesn't look white anymore. And I had also decided to do this as a traditional painting, which meant mixing my own colors, something that I am notoriously not that great at. So this painting did propose some challenges, I'm not gonna lie, but they were good challenges, and I love challenges. And in the end, my client really liked it, and I really liked it, so yay! Success! Like I mentioned, this piece was intended to be delivered digitally, so after I was finished, I scanned it in to my computer and formatted it for printing. I also formatted it to print easier as a card, and so forth. But whilst painting, is that the word, whilst? Whilst painting, yes. While I was painting, I did happen to avoid all of the colors that failed my Lightfastness test anyway, partly because it was easy to in this case. I didn't need to use purples and stuff, but also because why not? Like, now that I know which colors are not Lightfast, might as well avoid them wherever I can, right? The last thing, or actually second to last thing, I painted in this painting were the Chinese characters, and for that I used a very thin brush and some black paint. Black gouache, obviously. I do know that Chinese calligraphy has a rhythm and proper stroke pattern to it, and it's done pretty quickly with a thicker brush, but like I was gonna risk something like that, come on. Not to mention, I wasn't really interested in learning an entirely new art form at that moment, which is what calligraphy is, so I just drew it in with pencil and essentially filled in the lines with black paint as best I could, and tried to mimic the look of traditionally inked calligraphy. And in the end, it was a really fun piece to work on. It's one of those commissions that you feel really grateful to have been asked to do, because you know that it has meaning and it had challenges, but at the same time challenges that you could handle without feeling overwhelmed, which can happen sometimes. I was able to get some practice in with gouache, so yeah, it was really great, and I'm just really feel really grateful to have been able to work on it. I mean, doing commissions in general is something that I feel very, very grateful to do, like every time, because so far I have learned something from every single art commission I've done. I mean, so that's especially attributed to my clients. Like, I'm so grateful to my clients. I feel so blessed and lucky to have worked with such lovely, lovely people. Definitely did not take that for granted for a second. But yeah, that was the only one gouache painting and chat about telling you guys to learn about your tools. And I guess that kind of winds down this video. Ooh, I guess I should plug in my commissions, shouldn't I? Yes, let's do that. If you would ever like to commission me for something, a digital piece or traditional piece, just email me or use the contact form on my website, Zaccura.com. At the moment, I don't have any like slots or price sheets or anything streamlined like that. I'm just kind of taking them as they come on a case-to-case business, so yeah. So thank you so much for watching and listening and spending some of your day with me. I hope you enjoyed this video, found it helpful, insightful, or just entertaining. And if you did, please be sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe, and also hit that little bell so you stay notified on upcoming videos. Before you go, if you have a minute, be sure to leave a comment letting me know what you think. How did you like this painting and the conversation and the topics? And you know, I talked a lot about painting preservation and whatnot, and I always invite people, if you have potentially helpful insights or information or experience, to go ahead and share them in the comments. Share them with the Zaccura community so that everyone, including myself, can learn from you. If you'd like to check out my shop, subscribe to my newsletter, or request a commission quote, all that and more can be found over on my website, Zaccura.com. The link is down in the description box. Thank you guys, by the way, for the recent support on my shop. I love packing your orders and sending them out. I hope you guys enjoy your goodies this holiday season. And speaking of holiday season, I really hope that I can get another video up before the end of this year, but with the holidays coming, I don't know. So just in case I don't make it, I want to wish you guys a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. I hope you all stay safe and warm and happy, and until next time, stay awesome, stay inspired, always. See ya!